Hello and good afternoon. It's Phil Thatch and I'm here at home and I'm playing around with my old Tokina 100mm f2.8 macro lens. Now this is a Nikon f-mount lens that I have adapted to my Canon R6 and it's working pretty well. Of course, I can control the aperture manually on this ring and I can manually focus it, and then the camera will meter with it. So I'm using automatic ISO, I'm using a timer, and here is our zinnia bed, which we didn't think was going to make it. We planted this, Heather and I planted these flowers this spring, and there was a couple of frosts after we planted them, and one of them died, but the other 25 plants that we put out here have survived, and now that it is, I guess, mid-June, they are doing really well. And you know, last year we bought our zinnias from this exact same place, but we bought lots of different colors, and we noticed that the pink ones and the yellow ones did the very best. So this year we only bought pink and yellow, and as you can see, kaboom, it's doing really well, and I'm enjoying making some photographs with the R6 and the Tokina 100 f2.8 macro. I won't be able to tell you when I show you these photographs what aperture I'm using, but a few of the shots I've used f2.8 and I've used f4 a lot, and the smallest aperture I've used is f11, and I've tried to make some really up close genuine macro photos of these flowers, but the ones that I'm finding are the most attractive, at least when looking on the screen on the back of the camera, are when I'm kind of far back. Like this shot that I have set up right now, I'm focusing on this flower and these 2 or 3 buds and maybe this yellow flower in the background. I was kind of struggling with the macro lens to make something that I liked, and I showed you a setup for a photo that I made a number of different attempts at, and I didn't like any of them. I do like this shot though. This is pretty much a genuine macro shot of this zinnia bloom that's not quite fully opened up yet, and I like how this one turned out quite a bit. Well, I thought I'd try something a little different. This is the Canon RF7200 f2.8 L IS USM, and it has a really great minimum focus distance compared to some other 70-200s on the market. I've learned that the new Z-mount 70-200 for Nikon is even slightly closer than this one, but you know, it does focus breathe, so when you're really close to something, you're not going to get the full 200 millimeters, but I thought I would shoot a little bit with it. Let's see how close I can get to this flower right here. That's it right there, that's about minimum. So you can get pretty close, but you're probably only getting 135 or 140 millimeters realistically at that distance. So I made a few shots with this. I don't know, some of them might have turned out okay. Let's take a look at those. I tried to make a photograph of this bumblebee with the manual focus macro lens, but it would always move just slightly in between when I would get it in focus and when I would make the shot. But using the 70-200 with its autofocus, it turned out pretty good, even though this 70-200 is not really a macro lens. And check out this next photograph with its dreaminess. I've got one flower pretty well in focus, and then there's another pink flower in the background that's out of focus but not extremely out of focus. And then with this f5 shot, the flowers in the foreground and deep background are dreamily out of focus. After I shot with the 70-200 for a while, I went inside and got my 100-500. Now I've used this lens, which also has a great minimum focus distance. I've used it for macro photography a couple of times at Gibbs Gardens and once over at my buddy's garden. But this is the first time I've tried it here, and after shooting with those other 2 lenses, it took me a little bit of time to kind of get into my groove with this lens. You have to, I mean, even though it has a really great minimum focus distance, like I'm going to focus on this flower right here. Let's see how close I can get. That's it right there. But with 500 millimeters, even though it probably does focus breathe some, you can still get pretty close to a flower in it. But like I say, it took me a while to kind of get my head around these flowers. They're so densely packed, it's kind of it's kind of a mess trying to find an attractive composition. And I found that I kind of enjoy photographing the ones that aren't fully open yet, much like the tulips that I photographed at Gibbs Gardens, where I enjoyed taking pictures of the bulb or the closed flower more than the open flower. It's kind of the same situation here. I think they are really attractive, and I like to shoot one of those maybe with some flowers out of focus, the colorful open flowers out of focus in the background. That's kind of what's been working for me the best, I think. But really enjoy shooting with this 100 to 500 in macro or semi-macro situations like this. Here's a photograph of a not open yet bloom with a bokeh-fied bloom in the background. That's kind of a compositional technique that I liked a lot. And this photograph, it's really busy, but I like to pretend the yellow flower in the background is some sort of tower, and it's sticking up high over the jungle that surrounds it. Here's another photograph. This one has an ant on the main in focus bloom, and I've got lots of out of focus blooms, both open and not open, in the background. And if I move the settings out of the way, you can see there in the bottom there's another not open yet bloom that has a little critter on it. So there is that one, and then here is one more where I'm mainly focusing on a bloom that's not quite open yet, and I've got lots of out of focus colorful flowers in the background. I put the macro lens back on after I shot with the other two for a little while because I kind of felt like I had started to get my head around compositions, and then when I put the macro lens on, it's just a whole different ball game. You have to shoot completely differently. With the macro lens, I'm tripoded up. I was hand holding with the other lens, and you know, it's manual focus, so it takes a really long time to get everything dialed in and focus. So it's a whole different mindset. But I made a couple more shots with it. I didn't document it in the video, but I did put the 70 to 200 f2.8 back on for just a little while, and I didn't really come up with anything too great during that particular moment. I did like this one enough to share, but just barely. And here I have the macro lens back on the camera, and if you look really closely, you can see a critter hiding in this beautiful bloom with the nice bokeh-fied background. And then I switched over and I photographed this bloom, and this one's kind of almost open. I guess it's 2/3 of the way open, and I tried to get a lot of it in focus, so I stopped down to I think f11, and I ended up with 8000 ISO, but it still turned out okay. Okay, that's going to do it for me this afternoon. Time to go take the family to dinner. If you like the content, a thumbs up is always appreciated. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks a bunch for that. Have a great day, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.